IGN just hosted another Watch From Home theater, this time featuring screenwriters Gary Whitta and Chris Weitz talking about everyone's favorite Star Wars prequel, Rogue One. Their live commentary track proved to be rather informative, offering new insight into key characters and plot points, while also shedding more light on the ways the film changed during production. There's a link to the full commentary track in the description if you're interested, but here's a list of the coolest and most interesting things they revealed. As it turns out, Rogue One wasn't always called Rogue One. The team went through a number of different working titles for the film.
And by the way, there was one point at which we were kicking around titles for this, right? Rogue One was a good choice eventually, but one of them was Dark Times.
We had a lot. At one point, John Swartz, who is one of the creative executives of the film, had a list, and we all kind of voted on the ones that we like. I contributed too, like Shadow of the Death Star, all these kind of very fancy titles. One of the things that occurred to me was I went back and looked at all the previous films, and this is actually, it continues to be true even with the sequel trilogy now being completed. The titles of Star Wars saga films are always either 3 words or 4 words long. They just all are. And so it occurred to me that one of the ways that we could differentiate this movie from the rest is we had a title that was only 1 word or 2 words long. So like Star Wars Rebellion, Star Wars Rogue One, things like that. Let's do a title that's shorter. So right away, even for the title of the movie, this is something that doesn't necessarily conform to the unwritten rules of the saga film.
Rogue One set an unusual precedent for the Star Wars anthology movies by eliminating the iconic opening crawl sequence. However, it wasn't always intended to be that way.
Well, the way that the movie opens is really one of the first interesting conversations that Gareth and I had. Well, should there be an opening crawl? I did write one. You'll never see it, but I did. I wrote more than one. Back when we were still experimenting with the idea of maybe doing one. But one of the things that we arrived at fairly early on in the process was realizing that it was okay to liberate ourselves from the traditional storytelling language of Star Wars, and a lot of the visual tropes, the iris wipes, the opening crawl, things like that. We felt like these standalone movies had more license than the saga films to try and do something a little bit different.
When discussing the opening sequence where director Krennic confronts Galen Erso and his family, Whitta revealed a certain Quentin Tarantino flick had a strong influence on his writing.
Gareth and I talked a lot about how much we love the opening of *Inglourious Bastards*, if you remember that, with the French farmhouse, where Christoph Waltz, the Nazi, comes to interrogate the French farmer. And this scene was very much inspired by that. Krennic is basically the Christoph Waltz Nazi in this movie, coming to interrogate the poor innocents who have to hide this girl.
In another major departure from the Star Wars norm, Rogue One doesn't have any Jedi, but that wasn't always the case. Jyn's mother, Lyra, was originally written as a Jedi.
In the original version here, and the Kyber crystal, I think, is like the last tiny piece of that's left. But the original idea was that she was a Jedi in hiding, and it was one of the first things that got killed, and rightly so. Again, and that was kind of a vestige of me as a fanboy wanting to feel like we were checking all the Star Wars boxes. I remember saying to Gareth and to Doug Chang, who was in the room as well, that this is going to be the very first Star Wars movie that doesn't have a lightsaber in it. Like, how does that make you feel? And they were like, it makes us feel great. Like, we want to do those different things. Of course, it ended up not being true. We have an amazing lightsaber sequence at the end of the movie.
Rogue One first introduces Cassian Andor at a space station in the Ring of Kafrene, where he meets a spy who gives him intel about the Death Star. But in early drafts of the script, he was in a much different position.
Very, very early version of this. He was, in fact, he was a rebel soldier who was secretly working for Krennic. But then as he grew closer to Jyn and realized that the Empire had built this weapon, he's like, I never signed up for this. I didn't sign up for killing planets. He has a change of heart and flips to the rebel side. But that's after he's exposed as a spy, and at that point in the third act, he kind of has to win Jyn's trust back. That was all fun. That was all interesting. I think they actually shot some of that stuff early on, but I think this version ended up being kind of more nuanced and more interesting.
Calm down. Calm down. We'll be all right.
Rogue One introduces a fiendish alien creature named BORR GULLET, who psychically tortures Bodhi Rook. But BORR GULLET was originally portrayed much differently.
The first version of him, this is you know, my great sadness in life, is that on the cutting room floor is a BORR GULLET who is a memory trader, right? He lives on memories, and he especially he especially delights in traumatic memories. That they feed him, they're more delicious to him. So there was at one point a kind of a space Hannibal Lecter scene where BORR GULLET made Jyn trade her traumatic childhood memories for information that she wanted.
You might have noticed that Rogue One shows a title card for every new planet except for one, Darth Vader's home planet of Mustafar. And according to the writer, that was done to preserve the mystery of the iconic location.
Like, this is a Lego set. Like, I can't believe that an idea that I came up with this film is a Lego set now. But like, my big thing was like, I want to see Vader, again, always thinking about what John Knoll said, let's see something we haven't seen in Star Wars before. I was like, I want to see something. Where does Vader go when he's not working? Like, he's got to go somewhere. Like, where's his crib? Like, what does he do when he's on his day off? And Gareth loves that scene in The Empire Strikes Back when you just get the glimpse of Vader's head. Yeah, when the
the other one, yeah,
comes down. And so I thought, well, let's take that and blow that out and do a more powerful version of it. And I really liked the idea that Vader is so physically ruined and so destroyed and so damaged that every now and again he has to completely take off all the armor and take what's left of his body and put it in this Bacta tank to kind of heal and regenerate, you know, maybe one day every month or however, no, but it's something he has to do from time to time. And I love the idea of seeing him almost like a fetus in a jar, because it reminds us of just how little physically there is left of it.
Lord Vader, you seem unsettled.
The rebels seen in Rogue One are a motley assortment of Star Wars human and alien species, but one more iconic species narrowly missed the cut. Weitz said he wanted to include a Tusken Raider among the rebels, but Pablo Hidalgo of the Lucasfilm Story Group shot down the idea. Hidalgo was insistent that Tusken Raiders never leave Tatooine.
I did get shot down once by Pablo because I wanted a Tusken Raider to have gone off Tatooine and joined sort of guerrilla rebellion forces, and said no, they don't leave.
Jyn and Cassian have a strictly platonic friendship in Rogue One, but that wasn't always the case. Weitz revealed there was talk of introducing a romance between the two characters and thinks there may even be footage of those scenes. But in the end, he and Whitta found it refreshing to avoid a stereotypical Hollywood romance.
It was definitely a possibility.
Yeah, for sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was shot either. And you know, I like kissing, and that's very nice and stuff. But I think that there is the trope that every male and female you know, hero have to kiss, have to be romantically involved is maybe something that it was good to just sidestep in this one. It's clear that they have it incredibly deep connection.
Very early on there was more romantic chemistry, and I think it got scaled back less and less and less until now. I think it really is just kind of like a mutual respect that they have. They're obviously grown very close, but I don't think there's ever the hint of romantic. And I remember a lot of people finding that very refreshing, that the movie never went that route.
I think we'd all agree that the final Darth Vader sequence is one of the most memorable, badass moments in Rogue One, but it turns out there were other ideas on how to give him an awesome action scene.
Again, I originally pitched a version. I never wrote it, but I pitched a version of that Vader scene in the hallway, which was actually out on the beach in Scarif, where the idea was that Jyn and Cassian had gone up the tower, and the rebels had kind of bunkered in around it to prevent any Imperials following them up. And the word got back to Vader and his Star Destroyer, we can't get to the tower because the rebels have blockaded it. And Vader says, put me on that beach. I'll open the door for you. And he goes down there and just straight up murders every rebel on that beach. And that would have been a cool scene. But again, it never really got past the pitch process. I never wrote it. But I love the fact that the idea of that scene ended up making it into the movie in the hallway, which I actually think works better because it's more contained, it's more claustrophobic, it's more, I mean, you're trapped in that room with him, and I think that's more scary.
For more from Gary Whitta and Chris Weitz, watch the full episode of Watch from Home Theater, and while you're at it, check out The Walking Dead's Greg Nicotero and his commentary track for the zombie classic Night of the Living Dead. And for everything else, subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.